Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, January 14th, 2020 meeting of the Evanston Preservation Commission. We have a quorum, unusually large number. I think we may have every commissioner here.
No, we have
one missing?
9 out of 10.
Okay, 9 out of 10. I can't count. I have the sign-up sheet if anybody hasn't signed up. If any member of the public wishes to speak, the applicants don't have to sign this sign-up sheet. So what we'll do for each matter is we'll give the applicant an opportunity to present their application. And for each applicant, although we do have the packet, it's necessary for you to hit the main points of your presentation. I think we've all read the applications, but they're not always 100% clear, and I think everybody in the audience as well will want to understand the main points of the presentation. The commissioners can then ask the applicant any points of clarity, but we'll defer discussion until after public comment. We'll then move on to public comment. I'll call up each person who signed up the sign-up sheet to speak. There's actually an official timer now for a couple of minutes, and we'll ask you to, I think the timer goes off somehow when your 2 minutes is up, and then we'll ask you to wrap up in the next 10 seconds or so after that, give everybody a chance to speak. And then we'll have discussion by the commission and a vote on each matter. So the first matter tonight up is to be continued at the request of the applicant is 1204 Sherman Avenue. Was old business we'd heard before. Would somebody like to make a motion to continue this until our February meeting? Elliot?
I move that we continue the case of 1204 Sherman Avenue, number 19, Perez 245. Continue it until the meeting of February 11th, 2020.
Second, Julie. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I think everybody in favor. Second matter of old business is 2390 Orrington Avenue. Mr. Ballesteri. Yes, signed up.
So this is a continuation of our application from a few months now. Here's the proposed engineering plan, the site plan. What we're building is a 2-story prairie-style house. It is cedar siding, real brick siding as well, real wood trim, 30-year architectural shingles, and I have samples here if you guys want me to. I know I passed them out last time. I know some of your commission members might not have seen it, so I can always bring those up. We've went through zoning. We passed the zoning. It was under the max allowance that was allowable at the time. Here are the floor plans. Got a main floor, upper floor, and part of the attic area is finished. Here's a representation of the outside of the house. Again, those are some of the features that we have. Architectural shingles, all real cedar siding, wood trim, Anderson wood clad windows, brick exterior, and a covered porch in the front. That's the right elevation from north Lincoln Street. And this is the rear elevation west side with the two-car garage. Here's a rendering of the house as it shows on Orrington. This is the intersection of Orrington and Lincoln. And this is looking down Lincoln towards the garage alley towards Orrington that way. This is the zoning analysis. We went through that. Again, past that under the max allowance. These are minutes. You want me to keep going? Should I just leave these up, or?
No, you can go back to the drawings.
Okay. Did we get this PowerPoint summary attached?
Yeah, we have that.
Okay.
Probably in the first,
So it's just really,
he wants to see the.
I can just read through it. It's just a summary of what
The
we've,
first PDF. Thank you. So if you move forward, that would show the letter.
okay, so the letter is kind of summarized in this. These are the steps we've gone through to get to where we are today. Zoning analysis was required. We completed and approved that, adhered to all setback and lot coverage requirements set by the city of Evanston. The next thing the commission asked was that, the architectural style fit for the community, what we're designing fits Evanston. So we custom designed this house at the request of some of the people from Evanston to be more like the architectural style of the city. So we designed a prairie style house, just like there are, all around Evanston, which I know the commission's well aware of. The third was the size and lot coverage compared to the neighboring homes. We had some comments last time that it was a little bit too big of a footprint. This is actually our largest lot, and it's the same or less than all, actually, that's a typo, it's all other 18 neighboring homes that we built. So, the height was ask of the commission. Actually, back to that, the lot coverage or the size, we reduced the size of it twice per the feedback we got from the commission. The height was a concern of one of the neighbors. It's the same or less than all of the surrounding houses. In fact, 2350 on the other side that we most recently built, it's also a corner lot, a little bit smaller lot, larger house. The lot is actually 7344 square feet. Main floor is 2168. Lot coverage is 2188, which is about a 29.8% limit, 29.8%, 30% being the limit. And our proposed house right now, the lot is 600 square feet, 640 square feet bigger. The main floor is 1736 square feet main floor, so 330 square feet smaller. 2310 square feet max building lot coverage for 28 almost 29% lot coverage, which the limit set for everyone is 30%. And then the next thing that we were asked was to bring in samples, which we did, and I have here today again. And the last, really the root of all this is the tree protection plan. So what we did is we agreed with Evanston, as confirmed by the city attorney. We entered into an agreement, North Shore Builders and the city of Evanston, and agreed that 3 of the trees were to remain if possible. 2 of them were to keep, and we kept those 2, and we replatted from, I should say, 20 to 19, and it was approved by the city council and the mayor in 2011. It's resolution 13R11. And the whole reason we did that was to save that large oak at the end of that alley, and that's why we cut it there. And the plan was once that oak, if and when it does die, that we would donate, the owner of that lot 8 would donate that to the city for right away, for the alley to go through. So we also entered at that time a new tree preservation plan with the city, knowing that there was really not a whole lot buildable on lot 8 at the time because the trees, are positioned, one of them especially is closer to the center of that lot. So we were asked by the city again in another meeting to have a third-party arborist go out there, confirm that the best way to save the tree or both trees. And we hired, a local arborist, Nels Johnson. Never done business with him before, but I know they do a lot of business in Evanston. we met somebody out there a couple weeks later. They gave us the report that with their plan on how to save that tree, or the best plan to build a house and save at least one of those trees. And the plan was not to root it, because like a lot of residents are worried about, the root systems are probably intertwined. So to cut it at the stump and then treat the existing root system so it strengthens it, trim any dead branches or limbs on it, and then build a protective fence around it, the second tree. But, they confirmed that the roots of that one tree most likely extends all the way to the old Kendall College foundation. So anything that was going to be built, any construction would most likely disturb and kill that tree, and it just wasn't plausible. So we came back here and we've had a few meetings with that. Trees on that plan, the preservation plan, were marked to keep, to remain, or I'm sorry, to keep, to remove, and to keep if possible. And the keep if possible was the arborist, really telling us what was possible to keep and what wasn't possible to keep. So to date, we've complied with everything on, the list of what the preservation's purview or purviews looking for, the zoning, architectural style, size, lot coverage, materials. They're all in compliance, and actually with that tree protection plan. And we're saving 2 of the 3 that were marked from, the city council to remain if possible. And, we volunteered to comply more than what's required to replant new trees, and actually contract a company from out of state called Big Trees to transplant new trees to the arborist likings or preference, of what does good in this area and what the city needs to help make the city, more content with the process of cutting down that tree. So it's really been kind of the big issue with what we're dealing with right now. I don't know if it's so much the house. I think it's more the tree that has caused a lot of confusion. But at this point, we've kind of done everything we can do, and that's why we're here today. So.
I'm sorry, you just mentioned something I don't think I'd heard before about the city, per agreement with the city arborist, you're planting more trees. Is that something that just happened, or could you is that something from
I think that happened in maybe May or June. We met with a couple of the people that work with the alderman and Carlos, and I think Scott was there too. And we told them our plan. The arborist and I conferred on what trees are. There's a list of trees that Evanston prefers over other ones. So with that list, we then consulted with a firm called Big Trees, because we want to get the biggest trees we can, so we can show something of stuff. We don't want to plant something small. And at that next meeting, we came in with the plan of we're willing to do that and work with the arborist on where to plant these. So
I'm sorry, is that part of the plan? I don't recall seeing that, or is that something that's still?
So, yeah, there's an ordinance that every inch of tree you cut down, you have to plant a certain amount. I want to say it was somewhere in there. It was like maybe 1.5 or 2 per inch. So instead of planting a bunch of 4-inch calipers, we were looking at 6, 8, 10-inch caliper trees that this firm comes in and we plant a few of those, and then some ones that are rare or not possible to get in the larger size. So
is that something that's
here.
already been?
Yeah, it was presented.
Agreed to with the city, or
I think it was.
We just haven't heard about it.
I think it was presented in either the June or July meeting. Again, we're willing to work with the city because we don't know where, but we can plant them around our property. But I'm sure there's other places that the arborist prefers. But I think the point of that is that we're willing to work with the city to keep the, you know, the beauty of the trees, because that's what we're, at the end of the day, it's what we're here to do. We want to build our house and make our investors and bank and our company the money back, and just comply with what the, you know, the city agreed to us with, and also make the neighborhood, you know, just as beautiful as just as it is now.
Okay. Questions? We'll defer discussion, but questions for the applicant? I don't know if anybody wanted to see the materials again, or any questions?
I had a question. You were talking about, just to clarify, so with those two trees, as your plan stands now, you're keeping the one stump of the one tree so that as
Correct.
much of the root system will be,
Yeah, so the arborist recommendation, which we're going to take, is to cut it at the stump and not root it, because most likely those trees are pretty close together, they're
Okay.
intertwined, and if you do that, it would most likely kill both of them.
yeah,
So we cut it at the stump.
at the
and
stump.
then-
So that's the plan that
Yeah.
you would, okay.
Correct.
All right, well, we'll come
We're
back
not
to
touching
the
that. No.
applicant anyways. Thank you. If you'd like to, if you're, are you ready to have a seat, or is there some,
Unless there's other questions.
I'm sorry, was there any, I didn't see any other.
Good.
There might be more later. Thanks. The city attorney, Mr. DeBose, is here, I think, just to confirm the kind of legal setting and what we're supposed to decide.
Yes, Chair Simon, members of the commission. After our last meeting, we had discussions and had looked into kind of how trees fit into the standards that you're able to review. And we went back through the ordinance and looked through some case law and tried to find, just to provide you some guidance about what's written in the current Evanston ordinance, and basically so that you would know the proper guidelines to apply. In our previous meeting, a lot of people were pointing to walls of continuity, which is Section B, 289B, which is your standards for review of applications for certificates of appropriateness that refer to construction. This is the only section that that even halfway mentions tree or any kind of what do they call it, landscape masses. But in going back and reading this and speaking with staff, and the way that this is written currently, it allows you to consider walls of continuity, which are facades and property and site structures, such as masonry, walls, fences, and landscape masses, shall, when it's characteristic of the area, form cohesive walls of enclosure along a street to ensure visual compatibility with the property, structures, sites, public way, and objects and places to which such elements are visually related. So the walls of continuity in the beginning, the first part of this paragraph refers to facades and property and site structures, and then it has a such as paragraph, and that's where we get into landscape masses. But the such as is modifying site structures, and our ordinance defines structures. It gives a long list of them, but it's basically anything that's man-made. It does not refer to anything that's naturally growing. While there is quite the effort right now to include trees that's going through the legislative process, the current way the preservation code is written does not include trees as something for you to consider as part of your standards in 289B.
Okay. So just to clarify, so the current, there's not under our jurisdiction, but there's separately a tree ordinance right now that would only restrict cutting down, I think, trees on lots of over 2 acres. There's a proposed law that's not in effect that would change that, or?
Well, I think the tree ordinance that you're referring to, I believe, is the one that the applicant was talking about, where, if they cut down certain trees that they need to replace, of a certain caliber, that they're required to replace them. I believe that they've worked with, and Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, Paul DiAugustino, to make sure that they do have a plan that's in place, because the original development, the PD, is over 2 acres. So that tree ordinance definitely does apply to them, and I think they've been working with the city on that. But yes, that's correct. The trees are an important part of Evanston, and people are interested in them, and there definitely is legislation that's being worked on by staff and getting input from various members of the community before it goes to council. But that potentially could include trees like this, but that's not what's currently on the books. It's you're really kind of, your toolbox consists of what is currently in the ordinance. It may be supplemented at a later date that would allow a different result based solely on trees, but that's not currently what's in your toolbox.
Okay, questions from the commission for?
Yeah, I just, so I just want to talk about this possible ordinance that may be in the works, which may, like other suburbs have, which is a replacement in kind or of trees that are removed. Is that something that's being looked at? I mean, you alluded to it. Is it?
Sure, I believe it is. Scott, I believe, is working on it as well. But our current tree preservation ordinance has that in it as well.
But it's for a certain size lot. So I'm just talking about. Right.
But this PD, it applies to this PD, because when that tree preservation ordinance was passed the same night that the PD was passed for this development that had the tree preservation plan attached to it. It was all passed together, or not together, but it was on the same night. So it was intended to apply to this PD, and so far, it's to my understanding that the developers complied with it.
I'm really just talking about not this particular project, but just in terms of what there is something that is being looked at, and that would be for smaller lots, perhaps, or something. Is that
That's
the
correct.
case?
That's
And
correct.
I understand it isn't what we're looking at. I understand it isn't law. And I guess a question is, in a sort of the larger scope of things, does the Preservation Commission, can they just say something in support of that, a potential, do we carry any weight just to support something like that?
The only
Is it-
thing I would kind of caution you on is if it does specifically apply to preservation districts, I think it could come here for potentially your input as a group, and that might be the more appropriate time to comment on it. But a general statement of would probably be fine as well.
And we actually, back when this came up, I don't know, 7 or 8 months ago, we were asked for input, and we gave an official statement for the city council that we would support reexamination of this because of a perception of the public was dissatisfied that there was some merit to the fact that the current ordinance was several years old and maybe didn't really match well with the current environmental goals of the city. So we actually did that initially before this process started.
Well, I believe that that's probably being incorporated into the ordinance. I know I think most of the time when they talk about preservation, they refer to heritage trees, but this ordinance probably will, at least the most recent draft that I saw, is much more encompassing than that.
Okay, thank you. Any other
Yeah,
questions?
I
for
have
the-
one for you. So as I understand it, in this particular instance, when he's been referring to, let's call it replacing trees, he's essentially complying with the ordinance that was approved the night of the PD or the PUD.
That's my understanding. I haven't actually reviewed what they've submitted, but what he is talking about is the process that was put in place by the ordinance. And Scott, have you all, I guess we probably would need Paul DiAugustino to come to talk about what trees have actually been planted or not, but that is the process that's laid out in the ordinance is what he's referring to, or it seems to be referring to. I can't.
I
speak
guess
on
I have a question, which is either for you or the applicant, I'm not sure. These trees that are going to be planted in lieu of the one tree, is there a location as to where that's happening? Or is it anywhere in Evanston? Is it on this site? Is it on this particular parcel or lot, whatever that is, 8?
I believe Paul DiAugustino, who's in charge of our tree preservation ordinance, has a list of sites that he works with people who qualify under the current ordinance to make sure the trees are put in places that are beneficial to the city.
Okay, so it's not, we don't have an identified site. It's not necessarily at this, in this PUD.
Why don't you come in?
Is that correct?
So from what I understand is that we'd work with, there's a separate permitting process for cutting down that tree, and that's where the arborist would specify. There wouldn't be a whole lot of room on that
Well,
property.
maybe on one of the other lots.
Yeah, and then-
assuming those owners are.
So, and then what I was trying to say is that, we could comply by planting a bunch of small trees. We are complying with what was passed that night, but we're trying to go one step above by hiring a firm to get more substantial trees for you guys. And there's only so big we can go, though.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions for Attorney DuBose? No? Okay, then let's move on to the public comment. I've got the list of everyone who signed up, and Alderman Fisk, you can I'll add you at the end. If you could each please come up and limit your talk to 2 minutes. I think it'll still end up being 15 or 20 minutes by the time we get through everybody. Thank you. So the first person was Jean Smiling Coyote. If you could please, just despite the fact I'm reading, if you could introduce yourself before you speak. Thank you.
I'm Jean Smiling Coyote. Included in my written copy of my comments is a copy of my letter to Daniel J. Hyman of Millennium Properties, dated July 9th, 2009. I mentioned my support for the mature trees. I got no reply. We would not be here now if I had been brought on board to help guide the plan. The basic problem here isn't whether the developer will spare the mature trees at 2390 Orrington Avenue. The problem is the political economic power structure and the actions of people in both sectors to preserve it, even going forward. I'm sure a small number of zoning experts and arborists could have looked at the zoning maps and codes and the trees on site and created a map of the buildable footprint considering both legal and botanical constraints. And that is where the development plan should have begun. I have a number of preliminary floor plans for small houses which might fit. They could be used for guests, elders, or rental. I'd be happy to work with an architect to complete an appropriate plan. If it's found that a small house is not feasible there, that would have been established had the buildable footprint been established in the beginning. A park would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person who signed up is Ted Sykes.
Thank you. I'm Ted Sykes. We live 2 doors down. Our objection has been all along that, notwithstanding all the theoretical plans about what trees may be planted, no trees have been planted. The trees that have been put back in that development have all been done by the City of Evanston. They have City of Evanston tags on them. But our real objection is there's nothing defines the character of a neighborhood more than old-growth trees. And if we want to preserve the character of the neighborhood, then we're just very strongly object to just cavalierly cutting down a 300-year-old tree and saying, we'll cut down one, we'll hope the other two survive. We just think in all of these iterations, a smaller footprint we could have lived with, but putting in the same volume house, whether the porch is inside or outside, they've all been the same. So I think I speak for most of the neighborhood that we just think this is a monster that shouldn't go in there and at the expense of the neighborhood and the trees and the character thereof.
Thank you. The next person signed up is Ada Young. Excuse me if I'm mispronouncing everybody's names.
Hi, my name is Ada Young. I live next door to this lot. I'm also speaking on behalf of the trees. These trees are old trees, they're irreplaceable, and they're focal point character to Evanston. And, you know, we were here just a couple months ago, and we really fought for the trees, and they were supposed to come back with a smaller plan, and here we are again. It's the same footprint, and nothing has changed. I think we can just do more. The plan was to have all the trees remain, two of the three trees remain if possible. And I don't think they're doing enough. Remain if possible, and it is possible. I think it is possible. Their own tree experts saying that they can just cut down to the stump on one of the trees and try to preserve the other one. It's not enough. I think we just have to do more. We all can do more to save the tree. Again, remain if possible, and I think it is possible to keep the tree if the developer can just change their plans to a little smaller and work with the city and the neighbors to work with the lot that they have and the existing trees that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Leslie Shad.
Thank you very much. I'm Leslie Shad and from Evanston. I just wanted to mention that in addition to the landscape masses, which I do think protects the character and historic heritage of trees, but in addition to that, there was an agreement with the city to, protect trees if possible and for trees to remain. The one that was requested to remain is in poor condition because we plopped a house on it. The others that were supposed to retain if possible, he hasn't even adjusted his footprint for it. So how is that trying to do anything if possible? He can't. It's not if possible just because he says it's really hard. So I just object to the way that we're supporting the wishes of the city and trying. And I feel bad for you all that this falls on your shoulders to enforce the city agreement. But it was a city agreement in addition to the fact that this is, I believe, enforceable landscape masses. But this is a legal issue. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Nancy Wazalewski.
Hi, I'm Nancy Wazalewski. I live at 2380 Orrington. I live in the red brick house next to the proposed red house. I know from attending these meetings in the past few months that the commission is very interested in the building materials and the aesthetics of the home. So I agree with all my neighbors on what they've had to say, but I'd like to talk about the color. It was a point of pride by the North Shore builder representatives when we were building our house and telling us about this little planned community, that each house was going to have a distinctive style and color. They weren't going to allow, 3 brown houses and 4 gray houses next door to each other. They were supposed to have kind of a rhythm. So I'm a little confused on why this new house being proposed is bright red. And it looks like the brick you have matches our brick exactly. So I would just like to bring this up to the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's everybody who signed up. I mean, Alderman Fisk would like to speak, I can see. Yeah.
There's no good story about this. I'll make something up.
So thank you again for your service, and I know that this is particularly difficult and confusing, but I want to emphasize a couple of things to you. First of all, I want to remind you that I was one of the 5 folks who were the authors of the Northeast Evanston Historic District, both the National Register District and the local district. And the history of this location, before anything was built, was the trees. So this is in the middle of an ancient oak forest that this neighborhood and this historic district emerged. And we were well aware of that when we were writing the nominations, and including the importance of the streetscape and the contribution that these trees make. When you look at it from the air, you can see the vestiges of the oak forest. I live in the neighborhood. I could walk you around and point to where the remnants are, but they're there, and they're important. So from the beginning, when we first moved to consider the subdivision of the Kendall property, there were no plans for houses. The subdivision plan was just for the specific lots. Everyone was aware at the time that the most important, the most valuable lot was this one on the corner. I think there were even offers for this lot when the developer first was in the throes of, let's sell the lots individually and you come with your architect and design a house and put it up. That, of course, evolved into the plan that Ryan Holmes is doing now. But that has always been the most attractive lot. And maybe it was a mistake that the city council and myself didn't insist that that lot be developed first to protect the trees. There has never been one moment, one conversation with this developer that those trees should not be saved. We were boxed in to put in the best we could, which was if possible, and that meant move the house back and protect these trees. Think about them first. And that's not what happened. Now, I appreciate the fact, and I celebrate the fact that we ended up with a development on that site that meant every single individual house had to come before you, and you made things better. I mean, I think a lot of you may remember the plans that originally came for you for each individual house, and you did a better job than what the developer was planning to do in the beginning. So I thank you for that. But this is really important. The concept of landscape masses, tell me how that doesn't include trees, because it does. And these trees are extremely important. This is the most highly visible location in all of the Northeast Evanston Historic District. You have a vista across to the lighthouse, across Long Field. This is where everyone looks to establish their relationship to the historic district. It is important that we get this right, and it's important that we not take down these trees, and it's important that we try to protect them. The city could protect the tree that's in the alley because that's city-owned property. That's a public alley. I fought really hard to protect that. We could do that. Not so much the trees that were actually on private property and outside the building envelope. So that said, we've done what we can, but the presentation that was made here tonight, I think I'm just shaking my head about, because I think it's really disingenuous for the builder to say, hey, we've gone along and we brought the alderman in and we talked to staff and this is where we're ending up, and that's not what happened. We were very, very, very sure that they understood that the trees were the most important thing here and that a house could be designed. Within the past year, I've even suggested that I understand that you've sort of painted yourself into a corner with this particular lot, but there could be a smaller house on the site. We had presentations at council. The council is extremely supportive of that. The developer doesn't want to do that. I want to speak for one more minute about the heritage tree ordinance. Chicago Tribune, September 13th. Evanston officials may broaden the tree preservation ordinance to include more trees on private property, potentially defining certain types of heritage trees that would require a permit to cut down. That's coming to planning and development and to council. That has council support. That is in the pipeline. So don't let yourselves be the one that cut down the last 300-year-old tree on this property because you're worried about maybe this ordinance hasn't passed yet. It's coming. And it expresses the commitment of the council to save trees like this. I mean, I'm sure that you know, even though some of the other issues weren't in my ward, but there are people who care about how properties are being expanded on lots that have mature trees. And it's not just the property owners, it's the people who live next door. And you know very well how that fits in with our climate action plan and everything else that we're trying to do. So I'm going to ask you to please vote this down. We can do better than this. You can do better than this. The builder can do better than this. And that's the direction that we're moving as a city, and I'm asking you to please respect that and please help us out on this extremely important and sensitive site. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now have any discussion that anything people would like to raise. I mean, is there anything, we'll start on this end first. Is there anybody who would like to raise anything before a vote? No. Is there anybody on this end who would like to raise anything before a vote? Julie?
Well, so, the Preservation Commission, I will use this word, is frequently siloed into making decisions, and maybe siloed is a negative term, but let's say in this instance it is based on what we have before us. And so, which is, like, if I read the standard landscape masses, and I've thought about this, yes, if trees, like in a French chalet or street, if trees are all in a row and they make a strong wall and one house comes in and they cut them all down, that perhaps could be interpreted as a landscape mass. This doesn't really, in terms of a design sense, it doesn't really comprise that. I mean, in terms of what the walls of continuity means, in my opinion, given that, it seems really difficult to think about, so I see this site plan, I see the trees, and it says existing trees to remain if possible. Those are the trees that are cited. I know that may not have been the intent. It shows up. And so it's a difficult one if you were just trying to look at what we're slated with, which I'm calling maybe siloed, but what we're slated with and what we have, the information that we have to evaluate this. So I feel like my hands are sort of tied and maybe not in the direction I might want to move something towards.
Okay, anybody else?
I have a question. I was looking at, we've been talking about the standards for construction, but there's also the statement of purpose for our specific commission. And one of them is safeguarding the city's historic and cultural heritage as embodied and reflected in such district sites, buildings, structures, and object determined eligible for designation and et cetera. Sites, is that?
Would you ask the city attorney?
Sites? That's 281B. I don't know if I have the latest.
Right. Well, I mean, that's an interesting argument. I think from a legal perspective, what we're gonna have a hard time with is what the ordinance or the code sets out is what the applicant and should be the standard they are applying to is based in the standards of review for construction. I mean, if there wasn't such an explicit statement about what you should be considering for this type of action, I mean, there are all types of actions that this body hears, and City Council decided that the standards reviewed for construction are found in 289B. It's not perfect. I mean, I take your point that the purpose statement does seem to be more encompassing than what is in the actual list of standards. I guess my concern would be if you know, these are the standards that we've treated every applicant who comes before us, and that's, from a legal perspective, that's what we would recommend you use going forward. And again, it's not that landscape masses are in the way it's written is used as an example of a site structure. It's not that landscape masses by themselves are listed in these standards. It's part of the wall. It's in the section walls of continuity as following as such as describing structures, and then the code goes to describe structures. It actually defines it, and this is what really kind of ties our hands from our legal, in terms of our legal advice, is that it has to be something that is constructed or erected, which, you know, unfortunately, a tree is just it's not. It doesn't meet the definition. It's in there, so, you know, if this is something the community wants, which, you know, it sounds like it is, hopefully it'll make its way quickly and into your code. It's something that always can be changed.
Because the other one that, well, there are two regarding the house. One was Standard 5. It's talking about the rhythm and spacing of structures on the streets, the relationship of a structure object to the open space between it and adjoining structures and objects, setback from public ways, shall be visually compatible with the property, structure, sites, public ways, objects, and places to which it is visually related. Again, you know, this structure is going up in a neighborhood and is visually related to significant things in that neighborhood. It's another one that struck me. And then the other one for the commission this is a different topic, but the number 11, directional expression of facades. The facade, we talked about this last time, that with the corner lot, the primary facade is in line with Orrington. The secondary facade, or corner lots, sometimes we treat them as both primary facades, is coming out a little bit further from the other houses on, is it Lincoln? You know, and would kind of keeping the rhythm of those facades on Lincoln speak to two issues. One, the line of the facades on Lincoln and not having one house stick out a bit further, and maybe giving the trees a little bit more space to, you know, address that problem. Those are just questions for my fellow commissioners.
I'd like to just
Answer her question? Or were those questions? I wasn't sure.
well, if you want to, I mean, I think we discussed the fact that
I
couldn't
think,
build the same house.
I think my reading on if we beat number 9 to death is that the way I was reading it, that masonry walls, fences, and landscape masses were was associated with the notion of forming cohesive walls of enclosure. And that's where I was associating it within that paragraph, which I'm not sure that those two trees, without seeing, you know, even when we look at the whole block, are really part of some continuous wall, no matter what.
I agree with that.
And so I think that however we view them, whether we view them as masses and not, what a lot of people would have thought if they saw landscape masses as, you know, I don't know, 12 arborvitae and in a row, you know, 6 feet apart or something to that effect. But I think one of the difficulties that you asked, because I remember last time talking about which should be the front and which should not be, is I think that all of this is a consequence probably of the original platting of the entire subdivision, where if you look at, there's a whole series of long, narrow lots along Lincoln and probably along the south as well, and that probably the size of lots had a lot to do with either minimum lot size and to some extent maximizing the number of available lots. And that in hindsight, everybody can look at this one and say, as the alderwoman did, or alderperson, I can't decide which to say, sorry. You know, it would have been nice to start there, but the only way to probably have done that would have been to start replatting all the lots to the south of there, saying we're going to build here, and everybody else's lot is going to shrink as we head south in order to make up for, say, the loss of 10 feet along Lincoln or something to that effect. I think, unfortunately, we're now at the point where you started painting the room in one corner, and you're now there with the bucket, and all around you is wet paint. And hopefully you're at the door, but if you're not, you're in real trouble, and I think we're all at that location. And I'm not sure, you know, how we deal with it, and I think that at that point you really have to start looking at some of the other standards in terms of now looking at the house. And I think none of us have been talking about it. We had one person asking about materials, and I have to say that color is not within our purview at all. Whoever asked about the color of the adjoining house, and I'm not sure whether that's simply a representation on the drawing or you intend to match the adjoining house, but I don't know that we have any say over it anyway. I think my understanding of the ordinance, and Carlos can correct me, is that's not, you know, we can say, nice that you're doing it in brick, but not necessarily the color of brick.
The ordinance, the ordinance has reference to color for, well, my interpretation is like for addition, so that if you have an addition, it should be compatible with the color of the house, but not the commission saying it has to be this color. That type of, that's the only instance I can think of the commission have something to say about color.
So I I totally agree with Elliot on this, is like we're stuck with a lot with trees on it where really to build on it and save these trees, the house has to be so small that it makes absolutely, it would have been replatted and you would have had a really like two size lots maybe, so you could pull the house away. And now we are stuck with a lot, which, you know, this was platted way before my time on the commission, and I just don't, you know, it's like, we can sort of say, well, wish it wasn't like this, but here's the lot. So how small does the house have to be to protect the tree? It's got to be really narrow, and I don't know how that is fair to what we have, you know, slated before us with this lot.
You know, I mean, I hear your feelings that we're hamstrung. I mean, I'm not sure that's a bad thing. I mean, the ordinance grants us the rights as a preservation commission to make certain decisions over private lot owners, and it reserves to private lot owners, for good reason, other rights. And the city council's made those decisions. And the city council passed, number one, a specific specific subdivision plat with specific provisions on trees here. The city council simultaneously passed an ordinance which generally would exempt out all residential, all lots under 2 acres. I think that today, my personal belief is that that balance going forward needs to be changed. I think all of our environmental awareness is different. I think we all might feel, I feel certainly that in the future, there should be an ordinance that potentially restricts trees from this being torn down, and maybe the city council will decide there are certain intrusions that might be merited on private landowners who want to cut down large trees. I think, though, the city council is going to have to make decisions about legal safeguards. I don't think the city council is just going to pass a law saying we can tell private landowners what to do. I think there could be, you know, if they're heritage trees, for example, My recollection of some of the ordinances we looked at was there was a procedure like landmarking, where there was a public hearing where private lot owners had the chance to object, and through an established procedure to protect the balance of the rights, people could make that decision. And I think, as a commission, while it may be frustrating that we can't exercise general powers in the public good, I think, the balance is that private lot owners have rights. In this case, the city council made this decision. I don't think the same decision would or should be made today. But I care about the trees as much as anybody in this room does. But I think there are good reasons why the city council should have to pass an ordinance that has safeguards that are not available today to be decided on, that the city council has not decided on. And and I think as commissioners, we would want to have standards that, to the extent we are telling people you must follow the law, that there's a law. We can't just make up the law. And that in some ways is frustrating, but in some ways it's necessary to protect the mission of the commission so that we're not taking people's private rights, that we're exercising legitimately the authority for important preservation goals, which maybe in the future will increase, hopefully have increased scrutiny of trees. But I think that it's the balance between our rights and the private property owners' rights is a hard one, and we have to respect both. And sometimes it's just, we feel bad about it, but I think that's, on the whole, the right way it should work. Any other, Beth?
Yeah, I wanted to, regarding the standard number 5 about the rhythm of spacing of structures on streets, I guess I don't feel that the proposed design necessarily adheres to that with the houses that are along Orrington in particular. Now, I wasn't part of some of the discussions earlier. I read the minutes and whatnot, but I don't recall previous discussions about that. Could you all remind me if there was something I'm missing about how, just discussing the proposed plan and just how it fits with input here, I'll read the part. The rhythm of spacing and structures on streets, the relationship of a structure or object to the open space between it and adjoining structures or objects, and the setback from the public way shall be visually compatible with the property, structure, sites, public ways, objects, places to which it is visually related. And so I'm reading that and seeing where along Orrington you do have all of these long, narrow lots with certain scale of houses along the way, and they're all similar height and width. And then you have a corner lot, which is very complicated, trying to accommodate the visual pattern that you see along Orrington, but then that also has to turn the corner and accommodate the visual pattern that's along Orrington. And I guess for my eye, I'm not quite sure that it meets that standard. Could you all remind me if there's some discussion about the patterns that you're seeing along both vistas?
I mean, Elliot, I don't know if you want to.
I've got a comment about that, because I think it goes to something that we haven't been talking about. We seem to have focused on trees, and trees, really. And in fact, you have to look at all of the standards. And one disadvantage, and I keep going back through this packet, is that in the past, some of us here on the commission have even been unhappy when we've seen two-dimensional representations of the whole block. I won't remind many of you of which street we were talking about. But where we've seen the entire row of houses, and we can discuss the heights, the facades, the rhythm of the openings, et cetera, et cetera. And with the exception of two renderings here that barely show me Lincoln and show a little piece of Orrington behind some trees, I would not, if I weren't able to see the site itself, be able to objectively discuss literally starting with standard 1, and I guess I'll stop at 6. I won't worry as much about materials and texture. and possibly even 8, 10, and 11. And maybe some of my fellow commissioners can, but I don't understand how we can discuss some of those relationships given what we're looking at. If we were looking at this as any other application that we've seen, we'd be seeing something about adjoining houses down the block, around the corner, and so on and so forth. Regardless, around the corner is problematic here, but it's true. But at least, what is the relationship of some of those elements of this house? I'm not seeing that. I mean, that's my difficulty once I jump the hurdle of the trees, is really the standards that we're discussing for construction. And maybe somebody else can help or answer my question. That's it. I mean, you've all been looking at it. I don't see where we can say any of these things. I'm seeing 3 proposed elevations, or, let's talk about the 2 street elevations, and what else have we seen that allows you to basically discuss rhythm of solids and voids, proportion of openings, et cetera? Where is that in this presentation? It isn't there. Which is completely separate from the landscape issue. And I guess I'll throw the ball back to the applicant. You haven't presented those elements under which we should have been judging this project.
Yeah, so we complied with the setback requirements. The side setbacks are the same exact on all the along Orrington, and Lincoln's got the alley, so there's not really a, let's see. So we were asked to do a panned out version from Orrington to see the relation of the houses and the height and depth. Unfortunately, with the trees, it does block it a little, but you can look at the plat, and the spacing between those houses and the height of those houses are within, the height is within inches. I think it's a few inches shorter. And the spacing is the same exact setback that was required on the red brick house and the yellow house right there, that was set for us to build within. Same with the front yard and the side yard. This is another version you can see down that way. Somebody commented that it jots out a little bit. It actually doesn't. It's actually right in line with the other houses on Orrington. The porch might extend a little bit, but so does some of the other houses along Orrington. As you can see, 2 houses down. That site map just showed a portion of that other house. And again, with the trees there, I know it's hard to see down Lincoln, but you can see the spacing and the height of this house as well. And there is a mandatory setback from that alley that we have to comply with, that we did, which the house to your right did as well. So, and the depth of it this way is this same setback that was required for the house to your right as well.
But I think you missed my question, maybe, and maybe it's my fault. I mean, I don't even see a site plan here of the entire site. I don't know if anybody noticed, but we've got about 5 site plans in this packet, and all of them simply show you the parcels. There isn't a single one that shows me, the footprint of all, whether we used to call it in school figure ground relationships or whatever, for those architecture people around here. But at least seeing, when you're talking about the setbacks and all the rest, I don't see that. I don't see a drawing that showed me the adjoining lots in plan with buildings on them. You've shown the tree maps. You've shown the empty lots as they were set out by the surveyor. But even when you talk about this adjoining house and you say you've set back, it's not a question of here's the zoning line and, the guy's porch doesn't encroach. It is that porch and all the others. And what is that? I'm going to read from the standards, the rhythm of the solids and the voids in the facade, the rhythm of the spacing of structures. I mean, that one's maybe problematic given different, actually, there's an odd rhythm here because almost all the houses going west, if we go along Lincoln, have identical lots, and so there's going to be a rhythm that's going to be broken when you get to an alley and a larger lot anyway, and that's fine, because maybe the end structure has to anchor the corner and deal with it very differently than all the others. But then we turn the corner. A straight-on elevation without the trees and all the rest, showing 5 houses, showing what they look like, turning the corner and doing the same thing. It just isn't here if I want to make a very objective evaluation, and I'm sticking to literally, I was saying let's stop at 1 through 6, and I sort of went around the corner for a couple of the others, but those are, you wanted us to approve the house. I mean, in the end, we're supposed to be approving the house, as far as I know.
Things, Elliot, is that each of these houses was really, however you want to interpret this, we have looked at these houses separately. Each of them is like a different style. I mean, there is no context that these were all new houses at one point on an open, let's say, when the Kendall College, when that was subdivided, an open plat, and they were not thought of as, we're looking at it, there was not a general context for all of these houses. And so it's really hard to make an argument in my mind now when you're looking at a single house and saying, well, I understand that you could have more drawing, but really, if you even look at the adjacent houses that we can see, not along, what's the main street that we can't see? Is that Lincoln? Yeah. It's like, what is the connection? So.
Agree.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's your firm, whoever used to show up every couple months with 2 or 3 houses at a crack. Yes. We were looking at 2 or 3 houses, and we were, in fact, evaluating them in relation to one another. I think there were enough of us on the commission for at least the last half dozen of those, where the discussion used to really be about those houses and how they related to one another. We're not asking him to copy the houses. I don't think we're doing that at all. But I think if somebody came along here and this was an empty lot and these were existing buildings, we would be asking the same questions.
Have you gone and, we've been doing this for 8 months. Have you gone to see I've walked this lot 4 times. I think certainly walking the lot, you see the entire picture. I don't think there's any, would it actually serve a purpose to have drawings? There was, I think, when the last house was approved, simply, a diagram of just the lack of where each house was. Would that actually change your decision?
We actually looked at elevations. We had them moving windows and chimneys and all sorts of things. Right. So it wasn't that simplistic.
Right, but is there actually missing information you don't have? You've walked the lots. It's a little unfair after 8 months to come and make a new request.
I wasn't at the first one, and the second time they were here, I think it was primarily focused on trees and no discussion of the building at all. So I can't comment on what happened the first time.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the first time where we're really down to are we approving the house? And it has nothing to do with the floor plans.
We actually talked a great deal about the house, and I don't know that anybody was enthusiastic, but we talked about it a lot. It could have been that you weren't at one of the meetings.
I wasn't there in May.
Okay. Susie?
So back in May 14th, there was a lot of discussion and even comments specifically about the scale of the house and why it was maximized to the building lot. And in my opinion, based on Standard 10, I really don't think that any effort was given to try to work with that and modify that to address the objects in the site and the character of that district. I think the house has come back and it's the same scale. It's still maximum building lot. It's at 2312, right? And building lot is 2390 something. So I think, but the sites are all different. And like Julie just said, all the homes are different, all the sites are, like, there's different characters to those sites. And I think that this property is visually related to its site, which has objects and items that are on that site that it has to work within. And I think architecture design allows that opening. I know you guys picked this house, you picked this design. I don't have any issues with the design, but I do think the scale of the house is too big for that site. I don't think any effort, even from back in May when we made comments about it, I don't think any effort was made to change that or to work with the site. I think we've been given this design several times now, and none of that was adjusted. And in my opinion, I just don't think that like standard was met in my mind. So.
Okay, any further discussion? No. All right, I think we better vote. Would anybody like to make a motion? Somebody please make a motion, whether you disagree with it or not.
I've been accused of making motions even if I was voting against it and making, so
It's
I don't know what
permissible.
that
We
means.
do need a motion to vote on. Is it Ken?
I'll make a motion that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for the new construction house at 2390 Orrington Avenue. Standards for construction 1 through 14 and 16 apply.
Okay, a second.
I'll second it.
Elliot, second. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
How many?
2. All against? Is 7. Okay, thank you.
And just for purposes of, is there any standards that someone can address that have not been met because we need to file a report?
So Carlos, I would say that standard 10 for me was a problem, and it was stated in multiple previous meetings.
I concur with that, and I appreciate the history of the discussion, so thank you for that. And for number 5, the corner lot, I think, requires such unique consideration for two views, not only the fact that there's a park caddy corner also, but I just don't think it met those standards for number 5 and 10.
I agree with 5 and 10, and I threw in 11 because it's a corner lot.
Are we all supposed to provide? Or?
If
you have something different.
No, I think I tend
concur.
to agree that it's standard 10 was very problematic for me. I think I recognize the size of the lot, and I recognize that the way zoning now works, you're no longer into an FAR situation, but I think the scale and massing were such that I was actually very bothered by the mass of the structure, and then to some extent how it was handled in terms of how it turns the corner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next matter is 2404 Ridge Avenue, which the applicant has requested be continued to February 11th. We'll need a motion to continue. Would somebody please make a motion to continue this matter?
I'll move.
Thank you.
Well, let's get going. This is the public hearing one?
Yes.
I guess in this case, I move that the scheduled public hearing for 2404 Ridge Avenue, application 19 Pres 0266, be continued to February 11th, 2020 at the request of the applicant.
A second? Beth? All in favor, say aye. I think all were in favor. Okay. Next matter is 2138 Orrington Avenue.
Would you like us to continue, Gary?
I don't know what to expect tonight. We'll see. I would prefer not. Good evening. My name is Gary Shoemaker. I'm with Shoemaker Design Associates. I am here to present the demolition and construction of a new garage at 2138 Orrington. Let's see. Skip to the fun part. So the existing garage is a obviously non-original. You've seen the photographs. It's non-original two-car garage. It's a combination of stucco and wood siding. Probably not a Danley garage, but something period appropriate for what would have been a Danley garage, and it has reached the end of its useful life. We are proposing a new garage in roughly the same location. We're shifting the garage slightly to the north, and we're expanding it in order to create a mother-in-law suite, home office, whatever you'd like to call it, on the second floor. It is not a coach house. It's not intended to be a coach house. And it isn't permitted. It isn't going to be permitted as a coach house. The photographs here is the two-car garage. You can see the sag in the roof. You can see the elevations, the deterioration, and you can see, in comparison to the existing brick colonial structure, it is not in keeping with that structure. We are proposing. Let me flip to the rendering a little bit easier to understand here. So there. So we are proposing a two-car garage with a single door. We are not quite replicating, but we are adapting the two dormers from the existing house on the front, connecting them with a pair of windows in order to create a seating area on the inside. We are introducing similar cornice, crown moldings, gable ends, and brackets that are taken from the existing house. They're scaled more appropriately for the smaller garage. We have taken the same roof pitch from the existing house, and we have extended a telescoping addition on the side, which creates an entrance for the second floor space above, and terrace doors to the garden, which extends to the north. You can see in this photograph there is a shared driveway. So the view of this garage, while certainly from the alley, is from Orrington into the backyard. And one of these slightly out of order photo there. So the view from Orrington, as you pass, you would see the garage in the distance again, taking the rhythm of these dormers from the main house and adapting them to the back of the house, picking up on the dental moldings, the painted wood trim, the cornice moldings, and bringing them back here as a reflection of how this garage is intended to be developed in the rear yard. The other thing we've done is reoriented the entrance to the garage on access to the backyard, and we'll be replacing a portion of the fence on this property in order to make access to that. This is a white picket fence on the inside that'll go back. This is a board-on-board fence in the backyard that will remain and be matched on the other side. I think there was a question that might have come from one of the neighbors, which we've addressed directly as to what the fence type is, and it will match the existing fencing. So let's see. Again, relationship of scale, pitch of the roof. You can see that this house, the pitch of the roof and the dormer locations are in keeping with the mass of the house itself. This is the alley view. You can see the board-on-board fence here, This is the new section of fence where we'll include a gate and a fixed panel that provides access between the existing and the proposed garage. Red brick to match the existing house and painted siding above, also in keeping with the style of the dormers on the house itself. An unobscured view of the rear of the house. Again, taking the proportion of the adapted dormers to the back. We did not create the inset. We'll side the inside of this toward the alley. We don't need quite as much view of the alley. And then the front facade. And this is the north-facing facade of the garage structure.
Okay, questions for Gary?
Yeah, question. And the intent is not to go up to the alley and have access from the alley. It's
No.
only from the front driveway?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's existing. That's the way
Yeah,
the garage
right,
is used
okay.
now. The doors in the back are inaccessible. The slab is heaved and the alley has been paved higher than the floor of the garage. So they're decorative doors on the alley side today.
And you're not touching the lot line, it looks like, right?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Was the slightly smaller segment just so that we maintain that one?
Which on the front facade here?
Yeah. Well, it's on
This?
the, I guess, north. Is that in an effort to
Where
sort of
you-
maintain the large mass as a single unit and just have that as a, sort of read as a separate section?
You were talking about dropping the ridge here?
Yeah.
In-
Well, you
Yes.
also brought it in. You bumped
We
the
did.
whole thing.
We wanted the mass of a house of this period and this style would have been one large mass, and any additions, sleeping porches, things would have been slightly smaller in keeping with the stylistic qualities of a historic house like this. We're not attempting to mimic a historic house, but we would like the evolution of this garage structure to feel like it's in keeping with the stylistic cues of this period and this type of construction.
Okay. Thank you. Any discussion?
No.
Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll do it. All right, I move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for 2138 Orrington, case 19 PRES 0281, for the demolition of an existing detached two-car stucco garage and the construction of a new detached two-car garage with brick and cedar siding, gable roof with dormers on the east and west, and aluminum-clad double-hung windows with a clad door and an asphalt shingle roof. Applicable standards for construction, 1 through 5, 7, 8, 10, 11, 13, 14, and 16. And do we do demolition separately? Can we combine?
No, you can combine.
All right. And for demolition, 1 through 6.
Okay, a second? Laka, second. All in favor? Aye. I think that was unanimously in favor. Thank you. Last matter of new business is 612 Judson
Can
Avenue.
I ask, Gary, before you leave, why did you say that it wasn't a coach house?
Because it doesn't have a kitchen in it.
So this,
Yeah, it doesn't have a formal kitchen. It has a
okay. I just didn't understand how you differentiated it.
Zoning.
Okay.
We submitted it for zoning as a coach house, and they clarified that because it doesn't have a kitchen, it's not a coach house.
Okay.
Which also opens up another Pandora's box.
What, by not being a coach house or by being a coach house?
It's not a coach house.
Okay. I don't know what the differences are.
Up there would be better. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Good evening. My name is Rada Portzer. Sorry, I've got to get myself organized here. Is this something, is my,
You can go left and right. Right is going to the next level. Yeah.
okay. Sorry, my application isn't as fancy as the others, but we're doing this ourselves. This plea is to apply for a certificate of appropriateness for a home at 612 Judson due to a need to replace the side and back windows of our home. Basically, in August of this year, we approached Carlos because we had purchased this home. It was in severe disrepair. And we were advised by Mr. Ruiz that we would first try to repair our windows rather than replace them. So we were in agreement to do this. We really wanted to try to preserve the integrity of this home. It was built in 1890, and there was a reason we bought it. So we proceeded to do all our homework and basically learn how to do this. We also have 3 children, so my husband was doing this after work every day. And we also hired a window repair company to help us with this project. So I don't know if any of this really, here's some photos of the home. So unfortunately, despite our best efforts, we've come to find out that we will basically never fully be rid of the lead in the window jambs. We spoke with Bluestone Environmental, it's a lead abatement company, at length regarding this, and we were basically informed that even after spending, well, it's actually $16,000 instead of $14,000, for lead abatement in the window jambs, lead basically will stay, there's some amount of lead will stay in the window jambs, and the only thing that they would be able to do would be to encapsulate the remaining jambs. But research has shown that encapsulant does not work for abrasive area, basically high friction areas. So windows, window jambs and door jambs, they don't recommend using encapsulant on. So unfortunately, the original money we invested to make the windows mechanically usable and to somewhat, to restore them to a certain level, besides doing the jambs, has basically now been wasted. I approached Mr. Ruiz again, and basically we discussed coming here to you guys and seeing if there's any way that we can do window replacements. And unfortunately, we have 3 young children that if we did leave these windows as they are, there is a significant risk of lead poisoning. 2 of my kids are under the age of 6, which is severely detrimental for brain development. Any sort of lead dust in the home, which would be created with the frequent use of these windows, would be severely detrimental to the brain development of the kids. We are proposing to keep the front windows of the home intact. So the windows would, the 6 windows in the front would stay, and we would just take all the necessary precautions to have our kids not basically be around we wouldn't open the windows, and we also would be doing the indos, the interior storm windows, so that they wouldn't be in touch with that portion of the home at all. Now, the next thing is I did provide, actually, I don't know if this wasn't in my application, but I did make a little spreadsheet of all the different estimates that I was able to get, both for restoration and for replacement. I don't know if you're... For everybody to see the costs we're facing. This is the second portion of kind of the predicament that we're in, because we have, since we began rehabbing this home. We have been faced with significant surprises, specifically structurally. There's been a lot of things that never came up in the inspection report, and basically our budget has now doubled from where we started. We're self-financing this. We saved money the last 14 years to be able to afford a home for our family. I'm sorry. And we're out of money. So these estimates are just something that we're really up against a wall, and we cannot afford something that would be in kind, that would look the same as the home now. I know that in the past, the commission has approved aluminum clad windows, and I felt like I did a lot of research with different companies. I saw a lot of windows live in person, and I felt like this wasn't the cheapest window, but I felt like it looked the closest to perhaps an aluminum clad window. It would be black on the outside. I felt like white vinyl windows do look terrible, and I would never put that in. I felt like the black looked very close in the texture and the smoothness, the shine of an aluminum clad window. I realize it may not be the exact thing, but I also tried to represent, basically show in all the slides. These are the elevations, the way that it would look. But I measured out each window and I compared it to the proposed windows. And they're all very close, within an inch or two. So it's very similar what we would be getting. I don't know why this isn't. Many of these windows are not visible from a public way, but for the sake of not having a Frankenstein house, I wanted to get your permission to just do everything in the same, with the same window company. I don't know, I guess I'm appealing to the humanity in all of you. I realize this may not be your, you judge the way things look, but it's just really difficult for me because we're really kind of in a desperate spot at this point. Our kids are young. I can't keep the windows in the house that I have, and we don't have the funds for aluminum clad or wood.
Could you take us, I know you had pictures of the existing
Yes.
windows, and I think we just need to
Absolutely.
see everything.
Do I point this at, oh, okay.
There's also, there's also a pointer, the green line, it's a pointer on the device.
Okay. The green line is
You
it?
see the button with the green line in
Oh,
front of-
yeah.
in the middle, just below the screen.
Yes, okay.
That's a pointer.
Okay. I'm sorry, did you say you wanted photos of the windows from the outside?
Yeah, why don't you just take us through, what's there and explain it to us?
Basically, these are the windows as they are seen from a public way. This is what could be seen. Like I said, the front windows are beautiful. They have I believe they're called the eyebrow windows. We are keeping them. We have already, like I said, spent money making them mechanically operational as well as refinishing them. We still have the problem with the jams in those windows, but like I said, for the sake of keeping the integrity of this home, I myself don't want to get rid of those windows. So we will make sure that our kids just are not able to touch the jambs of those windows. This is kind of the various conditions that they are in. You can see some new like the new chains. This is after we had them repaired and changed out, like the cords. Some of them were just painted shut. And you can see at the bottom that we have attempted to, how would I say, de-lead the jambs, but it's just basically impossible. And after we realized how difficult it was when we reached out to professionals, they also said that you would never actually be completely rid of it. It's just not possible. Here are some various. This is this is all the south. When you're standing on the south side of the house, these are the windows. The only ones that are visible from a public way are E and A. And then G on the other, from this other view. And then in the back, they're visible from the alley. F is not visible at all. None of these are visible either. These are from the north side of the house.
Are those, I'm sorry, those storm windows, or are those actually?
Yes, those are storm windows over the windows. Yeah. We didn't get around to restoring those storm windows. We restored the front ones only. These are on the north side of the house, and our neighbor is very close to us on the north side of the house. And it was extremely difficult to even take this photo. It's a very narrow space. These are some elevation drawings. This is the house as it is right now. We're not changing the oval window. That's staying.
Which one is?
Which window are you not changing? I'm sorry?
The oval window.
The oval window.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that window is visible.
So, to my understanding, the section to the left is what is closest to the street, correct?
Correct. And really, you can barely see this window, but you can still see it from the sidewalk. But that's probably that is the edge of what you can see. Mm-hmm. The house juts out after this, and you cannot see any of this.
Did you say no change to the oval window?
No change. No.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is the view from the south. I'm sorry. No change. This is a sunroom. We're leaving it as is for now. It has old aluminum windows, actually. And this is what's visible, and the rest is not visible. There's a little bit more of an opening on the south side of the house, which is why more is visible from the street than on the north side. This is one proposed view. And another. I had two suggestions for the design of the windows. I just kind of thought that for the sake of uniformity, that we could just have one type of window if we were allowed to replace them, have it all be one. And I researched it, and I found that this kind of style of window was very common in craftsman homes. So that's why I suggested that. The other suggestion was just keeping it as close to what the house has now. But they're all different now, so. And this is the view from the west, the back. It is, it's from the alley. Yeah, they're both both of the windows in the back are visible from the alley. I don't know if you have any other questions. I'm happy to have you take a look at the window closer if you're interested. I mean, I did a lot of research on this in my spare time, having 3 kids, and I really feel like, you know, I was trying to bridge the aesthetic and financial gap, and this is truly. I felt like a very solid, good window, and there is the option of having interior grids, and you could change it to whatever your liking is, and have it be more of a craftsman or nothing at all. So,
Did you have some kind of a proposal from the window company as to the windows you'd like to get? Was that in your packet?
yeah, it is, and I actually have. Well, I have all the estimates if you want, but I have their estimate as well.
Those are in the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Can you tell us what happens with the muttons on the vinyl window? Are they inside and they're just, what happens with the muttons?
I'm sorry, I don't know what a mutton is.
Oh, it's the dividers.
Oh, what happens with them?
Where are they?
Oh.
On the window. No, not on that window, but in general.
In general, you can put them anywhere you'd like.
So
and you
they're
can put
just a
however many you want.
snap in and it goes inside the window.
Correct, between the 2 panes of glass. No, there wouldn't be an SDL. It wouldn't be like an SDL.
So it's just something that goes inside. So if we're all talking aesthetically about this, which we may not all be, but, you know, it's a very different reading of a window where you have the grid that's in between because of the reflection, I think, so.
It can be for sure. Yeah, you're right. I've seen it. I've seen it in person. The thing is, though, and this is something that I also considered. I mean, do we put them in at all, or do we not put any in? And just so that we don't have something trying to be something else. I also thought at the distance that all of these windows would be from a public way, it really wouldn't be as obvious as it would be if it was in the very front, or if it was something where the side of the house was a lot closer. It doesn't, like I said, for me, it's just important to have a window that doesn't have lead in it. I'm willing to work with you guys as far as the design aspect of the grids, if that is something that would be an issue. Like I said, I have no other choices, so. Otherwise, as far as proportions, I felt like this company was really flexible and pretty close to what we have as far as the proportions of the windows, the frame, and even the grids, even though obviously the grids are not the same as a real SDL, like the width was.
I'm sorry, could you show us the proposal for the windows that you would like to get? I don't recall if it was.
Yeah, which company was that?
Climate Guard, it's on there.
Yeah,
No, I know, but I just wanted to see the more detailed
I don't think it's
proposal.
on the, I don't know if it's in the packet.
Yeah, I thought the packet had other.
Yeah, they're all over
There was one page. Is there more from Climate Guard than just that one page explaining what specifically they're going to give you?
I have grid configuration from them.
But you don't have did they give you a section through the window?
I have that, actually. I have it as part of it. I have a pamphlet that shows the section. Is that okay?
Sure. We can
Pretty
pass it.
detailed, yeah.
We can pass it.
And I'm sorry, did you also have like a written itemized proposal from the company you would like to go with?
Yes.
Okay, if we could see that too, that'd be
Sure.
great.
It is.
And I think that's the second to
That's
last
Climate
page.
Guard, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Second to last page in the packet.
I also have it here if you'd like to see
Sure.
it. Okay.
Please.
Climate Guard, right?
Yeah. Seems to be a continuation.
Thank you.
And which of the models were you, was it the U-Shield Plus or Pro? Or?
I'm sorry. Well, this is, the UltraView is an actual model as well. They have other ones.
Ah, okay.
So that's the one that we were going to go with. There's, I believe, thermal ones, and then there's some there's quality ones that take care of it. So this is the middle.
And which, I'm sorry, which series is that, the one that you're choosing?
The UltraView?
UltraView.
Yes. It's the middle, mid-range.
Okay. Maybe pass it down this way first.
So you have existing openings, or these are all standard sizes?
No, no, no. They would be fit for our openings.
They're all custom sizes?
Yes, yes. No, we're not changing any of the openings.
So, just my 2 cents here, and I greatly appreciate the elevations that you've drawn. I know it's probably a lot for you guys to take this on, just because it's not your field of expertise. So you did a nice job with clarifying all that. That was
I
really
have
great.
to say I had help, but I did do most of it.
So that was clear with the windows and what you were changing and the sizes. Typically, we do see a section of your existing window, which shows in cross-section what the profiles of the window pieces are.
Mm-hmm.
Because often we're very particular about what that profile is on the exterior versus what you're putting in. And I think that's probably why my fellow commissioners have asked for this section detail of the new window.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I know that you've said that this window looks similar to yours. I think it is helpful for us to see those two drawings side by side
Mm-hmm.
with dimension strings, just so that we can kind of compare it exactly. It's nice to see the pictures, and you've showed us a lot of that. It is nice to see just like in a drawing. In my 2 cents on this is that I don't think vinyl windows are typically something that we approve on.
I understand.
In a historic district. I think the aluminum clad, which I'm sure you mentioned you've heard, are usually what we ask for people to use if they're not going to come back with the wood windows. So I think as close as they are, in my opinion, they're not as, they do have differences, and I do think that the Muttons are different aesthetically, but I will let the rest of my commissioners.
I mean, I want to say I really understand the cost implications. I drove by the house. It's a really great house. It looks like a lot of work still, and it's an expense, and I understand that. It's just, for me, it's very hard to approve a vinyl window because of it just, we haven't, it does set a precedence about what we're doing here. I think as a commission, if you go back to those original standards, it says basically repair rather than replace, and we understand that that is costly and not always possible. But it's a hard one to sort of say, in this instance, and I understand the costs. I really do. I'm an architect. I do understand these. But it will not look like the the windows, the grid on the inside will not, if you take it away, the scale will not look like what was there. And so, you know, I understand, but it's a tough one. And I really appreciate you purchasing the house. And maybe, did you think about trying to do like some of the windows, replace some of them, and then wait on others, and just try to repaint the ones, you know, where if paint is chipping or something like that? I mean, the other thing about the abatement of paint, it's probably, unless you painted all your trim on the house, inside the house, and I don't know what the interiors look like, but you know, historically, I mean, that it would have had lead paint. So how did you strip
did.
everything?
I
or-
actually found a guy named Daryl of Chicago
Great.
Wood Stripping that is giving me a huge deal on all of the trim in my home so that I can keep it and not just purchase something from Menards. So I'm not.
It's great.
I totally, like I said, there's a reason I bought this home, and I'm fighting an immense fight financially, emotionally, to try to bring this home back to light because it was severely neglected, severely. And unfortunately, I don't feel that I can leave some windows. I can leave the front. That's worth the risk and the sacrifice to leave the front. But I can't live in a home where I can't open a window because I'm worried about the dust flying and then my toddler crawling into it. And I mean, that, believe it or not, that happens. And my husband and I, just from working on the house, the work that we've been doing so far, my husband does have lead in his system. He tested 4.2. You treated at 5. And obviously my kids don't go into the house right now. I wouldn't allow it. But I'm also pressed against a timeline where we sold our condo. We're supposed to move in. I'm begging friends to stay so that we can just, I mean, there's a whole lot of things going on at the same time. And perhaps you can say it was poor decision making, but I feel that we really did the best that we could given the information we had before we purchased this home. And actually we were told, and this is something that I will say, I'm not defending our decision, but we were told by the real estate agent, by the owner, that we only had to keep the front windows.
I'm really sorry about that. You know what? This happens. I have seen this happen with realtors. There are a myriad of architects in the city of Evanston and Carlos, so I'm just speaking up for this, Carlos here at the city, where you can find the information. You can go online now. We wrote the guidelines. You can find your house. You can look at what it means if it's in a historic district and what that might mean. Realtors, not all, but many, in trying to sell a house may
Sure.
overlook that information, and I'm sorry.
No, and I, once again, I wanted to keep the windows. And that's why I paid $5,200 to have them mechanically, all of them fixed. All of them work now. They didn't before. We went several different online stores and eBay to find the right chains for this home. The weights were found. Some of them had fallen down to the basement. Like, we did the work. I wanted to keep these windows. I legitimately did. I was extremely sad to find out that, guess what? The lead in the jambs is something that you cannot be rid of. And I just can't take that risk for my family. I'm in a very difficult position here. I really cannot risk my family's health, but on the other hand, I don't have, my lowest quote was $39,500 for aluminum clad. I simply do not have $39,000. I don't. This house has swallowed up everything.
I had a question about the lead. I didn't quite understand why it's in the jambs. I mean, this has been a big issue with window removal replacement for about the last, about 10 years ago, maybe less. EPA came out with all these requirements, and suddenly every single window replacement contractor discovered that he was going to be investing in HEPA filters and almost encapsulating the house as he replaced the windows. And it's a whole procedure. They have to seal up
Correct.
the inside. There's some ironies to that. They put all sorts of stuff outside, collect all the windows, collect everything they've ground off, and then they can literally take that entire piece of plastic with all of the lead and just throw it into your garbage can because there's no disposal requirement other than protecting the house. But what I don't understand is, I mean, number one, is this particular contractor, is he telling you that because I don't see anything in these proposals that say, I'm complying, because
Yes, he is,
I hate to say
actually.
there's all these guys, that also will fix your chimneys and
Absolutely,
and
no.
your boiler and all the rest.
He
And I
actually-
worry about that for your sake, regardless.
Right. No, he is. I have the application. I actually filed just to get things moving because we're in such a terrible time crunch. I kind of pre-filed the application for just because I know there's like several days of approval, several weeks of approval. So he had to sign a paper saying that he was compliant with the, I believe, is it RRP procedures?
I don't remember,
Or
but
like-
he has to actually have taken a class and been
Absolutely.
licensed for it.
Yes,
Okay.
they all are. Yeah, and he signed, and yes, they are. They're actually a pretty big company. They're a local company, but they're a very big company in Chicago, and they do this quite a lot. And yes, they would do all that. But this was also the reason why I wanted to do this before we moved in, obviously, and before several other stages of work were done in the house, so that the windows could go in first. And if there is any sort of additional lead dust, it wouldn't get in on the drywall or anything else, or on the floor. So all of that would be cleaned up before we were moved in, any sort of disturbance.
You'd actually be removing, you have to take all the trim off of the inside.
I did already.
So there's no trim, and then you have to take the whole frame out and all of that of the existing window because it's all painted.
Yes.
And just, and then you're going to put it, so here's another thing about, I just want to say this about vinyl windows, maybe the initial installations list, but these windows, the reason, are not, I'm just talking about the longevity of the vinyl window.
Correct.
Is not, if
And-
you're thinking about the cost of all of this.
If I can sign for you guys right now that the moment we have more money, I am in complete
I don't know.
agreement.
So usually, can I just say this to the commission? I never, we usually do not have cases of, in terms of making these decisions based on cost issues. I mean, we have been so careful about other homes and in terms of what we've asked for. Just think about the roof on the home that was, the wood shingle roof that we asked for to be replaced, the cost of that. I mean, we were looking at the materiality. We were not talking about the cost of that. I just think we should try to, well, I know it's case by case, but I think we should try to think about it. It's a hard one when I understand these are very costly, but we should try to think about staying a course, I believe.
I don't know that any of us have ever reviewed one, but there is a process for economic hardship.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Carlos has talked to you about that, and I don't even know what necessarily the details are, but perhaps that should be explored.
From what I understand, there's, I believe, never been one that has been, is that correct? There's just one in the pipeline, one in the works, and it's never.
Yeah, we have received one that is pending.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I think that if the commission has a way to look at your application in a consistent way with the other applications, it would require that they will deny this application, then you apply immediately for the economic hardship.
Mhm.
And if maybe the commission looks at the chart or the table of cost and all the work you went through, everything that you put together, you may have a case. I just cannot really guarantee, but, I don't know if that's what you're leading to.
Yeah, we went over the ordinance in light of the current pending case, and it doesn't seem to speak of just any economic hardship. It says that the commission shall only approve a certificate of economic hardship upon a determination that the denial of the certificate of appropriateness has resulted in the denial of all reasonable use and return from the property. So it seems to be talking about something, really talking about rendering the property completely unusable or perhaps demolition.
I think it was
or something like
intended, I think it was intended, for people who are, like the one we're having, that he can't rent it or sell it or something. And I'm not sure, but I suspect that, it would be an economic hardship in the sense that they own a house and can't live in it. And that's a fairly major economic hardship.
And are living at their friends.
By the way, in just going through Climate Guard's site, I haven't found them yet. I always look for the 1-star reviews and never the 5-star reviews. But I was actually, my concern on your behalf is that they're warranting the product, but not it's sort of lifetime transferable to some future owner maybe. I think what worries me more is that they don't seem to be really saying anything about the installation, and I'd be much more concerned, particularly because of water, wind, and all the rest, those of us who have gone through this, with making sure that that's what they're warranting, less the product. The product may last 10 years or whatever they're giving you. That's about it, by the way, for whoever asked. But it's more about the installation. If once, it's called, gee, water's coming in, gee, that's too bad, we didn't warranty you that. Or we'll come back and caulk, which all of us dread.
Architects dread. Are you asking me my?
Well, I think I would be concerned. I think even if you were doing vinyl windows, and we were talking about that, about whether you've got comparable proposals for other.
I believe that sort of situation can happen with any window installation. It could happen with wood and aluminum clad.
Yes, but you want them to provide you with some protection.
I do.
Are you buying into the low cost without recognizing?
I don't think that's what, I know that's I just don't, I think this is way beyond our purview. I think we, it just is. To be looking at costs, and I understand your story, and it's like, I feel your pain. I live in a 100-year-old building, and we haven't replaced our windows. I'm sure there's lead paint, which maybe that's why I am the way I am. But I don't mean to make light, but yes, I live in 100 years. It is. So I really do understand, but I just don't think that's. We're looking at these numbers. When do we do? I just am asking that. When do we just do that and then say, okay, this is so expensive, you can use this lesser material?
We haven't.
Perhaps.
So why would we?
Right? Could I?
I think I'd like to go back to Mark's point earlier, is that we're not the city council. We've been given the standards that we're supposed to use in the ordinance by the city council, and nowhere in the standards does it talk about cost. The economic hardship provision is there if something is totally uneconomic and rendering their family home unfit for human habitation. I think you can make an argument, but that's for another time. But at the end of the day, we just have to go back and look at the standards. And I think the material question is a big one. I don't think vinyl substituting for a wood window meets the standards in my opinion. I don't think putting a muntin grid between the glass meets the standards in terms of recreating the appearance of a divided light historic window. We've always insisted on the applied exterior muntin grill to give that appearance. And then finally, I'd like you to reconsider what's happening in terms of the pattern of which window is divided in which way throughout. You do have a big mixture of styles and types in the existing house. I think maybe the front of the front facade is the original type, and that should be the model that you use going forward. If you're going to change things, I would not consider the 3 light over 1
Mhm.
craftsman style for this house. I don't think that's appropriate at all, and
Okay.
there's no precedent
That's
for that
fine.
on this house. So I think it's the 2 over 2 design
Okay.
seems to be the historic model. And then how that gets applied to some of the window openings that may have been changed in the past is something to be worked out. But I think that's those 3 issues are where I see this not really meeting the standards.
Mhm. Unfortunately, go ahead.
Maybe you should have unless there are more questions, maybe you have a seat and let us freely discuss the
Have a
matter.
seat and
Yeah.
let you guys discuss. Do you want me to leave?
Yeah, why don't you have a seat?
No, we
Just
wanted
have
to
a seat.
stay.
No, you're welcome, you should stay.
You guys want to discuss this in private? I don't know.
Just let us-
Sorry.
No.
I think we're at the point where we need discussion between commissioners.
Of course,
maybe. Thank you.
yes.
No, please stay, and it's just a matter of having you taking a little break.
Yeah, take a seat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I think, I certainly agree with Ken that it's the specific feature of the windows. I'm not sure. I couldn't even tell what was there with the storms, and I don't even know. But in terms of considering cost, there's nothing that tells us that, for example, that we could have higher expectations for a more expensive home. But I think as a practical matter, we probably do that to some extent all the time. But I think, certainly we've all been willing to ask somebody to spend more money than for a more preservation consistent solution. But in this case, it seems very extreme to me. Between the fact that the front facade would be preserved, which is what's highly visible, and the cost issues are not small. For example, on the house on Euclid Park, the cost actually of replacing with the historic materials was actually less. And his argument was more 15 years out, it would end up costing more, and that wasn't certainly an argument sufficient to convince me. I think this case is, it would just, with a lot of reluctance and not really disagreeing at all with the things you're saying, I would be willing to approve if we thought particularly if the issues Ken's raising were addressed, because I just don't know what's there and what the particulars are.
I really think we have to be very careful, because we have seen homes where the replacement was vinyl, and there's one that comes to mind, and it was this a landmark or in a historic district? And they just did the work without even coming before the commission, and they put in vinyl windows. And it is, and then they, remember this project, and then they tried to, they tried to rescind the landmark. Wasn't that the project?
But actually, they had come to get the building permit, and they alleged that they did not.
Right.
They had never known that they were a
Right.
landmark.
Right.
And that's when the city allocated, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and now everybody's deed contains the information so that no one in the future.
Right.
The
Can
council
just-
basically overrode, we weren't on it yet, they overrode the commission, because the commission had voted not to allow them to
Right.
install the windows. They claimed they'd already bought the windows.
But once you have one, I believe that we're always setting, it's like anyone can use something in the future, to come before us and then say, well, we know that this home, you accepted vinyl windows, and you accepted vinyl windows on every facade but the front, even though you can't actually see the two sides from a public way. I went by the house. And so you run into, it becomes really precarious to me, because it's like, okay, it's case by case, but suddenly we're really diminishing, the quality of the house. and someone else can use it as an argument, because we're really not supposed to be looking at like the individual who's doing the work and how much money they may or may not have to do the work. I mean, that is not really a standard here. So I think I find that to be dangerous, and also expecting that someone who seems like they have a really big house, so they must have a lot of money. Those two don't always necessarily go together, that they can do all the work. And it just, that we're asking them to do, and that becomes a presumption that is also dangerous. So I think it's important to kind of stay, we have changed our opinions about always the restoration of windows, even though that is actually probably what National Park Service, wants us to do, or what they say, restore rather than replace. And we have gotten broader in our interpretation, but I think we have to be very careful, because it is this slippery slope in terms of what we're kind of deeded to do.
Well, I think last time, or I don't know if it was the last one or 2 meetings ago, where we got into Ultrex and so on and so forth, fiberglass windows. I think one of the difficulties is, and I was talking to Carlos about it, and then to you, Julie, today, that I don't even know when aluminum, entered the scene, and suddenly, the aluminum-clad window became okay. I've never seen a document, and as I think I said today, that there ought to be something set down to the point where we have it as this is how the commission has determined it. We're all sort of doing it as, well, historically we've approved aluminum. When did aluminum get approved? Were there windows that weren't approved, even with aluminum cladding? Why aluminum
Elliot,
versus
we have
anything
asked in terms of, in terms of wood windows, and we said we would prefer, I noticed we would prefer that there be wood windows, and SDLs came in, simulated divided light window, sort of came into the picture when they could actually make a reasonable facsimile of an existing historic window that was single glazed with like a 7/8 inch mutton, and those things could be reproduced with a thermopane window. And when I came on, we were looking at those and accepting those.
I'm saying that if you anodize the aluminum, it's going to change color over time, and you're not going to go back and paint it. So there's a lot of issues that aren't really there. And I think that, this isn't, it's unfortunate to be sitting here and discussing it with a case pending, as opposed to having said, and I think we talked about, do we all hide in the woods for the retreat and discuss nothing but windows and appropriate materials? Because I think it's such a big issue. How do we, right now we don't have, literally when we say in the past, or however we've said it, we haven't approved anything but aluminum. Where did that begin, and what was the case that first approved it? I'm going to dump on Carlos.
Cladding over a wood window.
Clad in general, but somehow, the vinyl clad window was a no-no, the aluminum clad window was fine. Why?
Certain instances, but okay, so let's say we do need
certain instances
where it has, where we've looked at it.
I can find out the date or something.
Well, can
but
I just, okay.
But I think that she's not proposing aluminum. She's proposing vinyl.
I know.
So.
But whether it's vinyl, but that's the point. When did we decide that one material other than wood? Historically, these windows were either wood or steel.
I don't know. I'm not sure if we're going to resolve that question tonight. The issue I have goes back to some of what Ken says is, well, first of all, the precedent, if I hear the concerns about lead, they're huge concerns. I applaud the work that's been done on the windows. There's some school of thought that once you do get like well operating oiled windows with the addition of a light coat of paint and always keeping them sliding, you don't get the friction that leads to the lead. The lead is a big concern when they're deteriorated, and it's great that you've spent time fixing them up. If we went to the point of historic, we haven't allowed vinyl windows in historic districts, and if we get to the point where we're concerned about lead and will allow vinyl windows, then that's a huge precedent that we're allowing, and we can't for reasons we discussed and what we're given. There's a reason that the economic hardship bar hasn't been used, and the bar is so high because it's not as much as I hear and feel for the predicament. I don't think that it's something that we can apply equally across. I feel for what you're going through, but more and more cases, I don't know how to measure, to make a measure that people can come to us with, that we can make a objective decision.
We can't. That's why, that's why Julie said there's no standards that speak to any of that.
And so I don't think that, I think that what's being proposed is very far from what we've ever approved ever before in terms of profiles and muttons, and it sets a precedent that I'm just not comfortable, as much as I feel for the argument making.
Well, I think the issue of the muttons shouldn't even be discussed, because there aren't muttons there. Only between the glass stuff is just as bad as the old Pellas that used to put the grid on the inside of your window that you could snap off so you could wash your windows, and so on and so forth. Let me ask a really sort of not so dumb question, which is standard number 10. And whether that can, in this particular case, can, I hate to say, be used as a rationale, but I will. Because we're talking about inserting an item that can be, we've always talked about, can it be readily removed, can it be readily replaced, and so on and so forth. And in this particular case, I'm looking at that this is an alteration that only involves the removal of the windows and installation of windows, which could be at any future time removed and replaced. I'm just saying.
I think that is, you're not going to, the windows to be removed, what happens to, we haven't even talked about what happens to the trim on the exterior and the way the vinyl window goes in the opening, because we haven't seen those sections.
Right.
And if we start interpreting number 10 in that way, it's like, then you might just as well, talk about any opening, any door, and all of the cases that have come before us, or anything, and that just is so far from my understanding of what we've been doing all of this time. I don't think, but I don't agree. But I do think, Elliot, what you said is, when we have our retreat, which we should have, we should be able to actually kind of cement what windows we have approved, why, what they are. We might want samples. We might want to do this in further depth so that it is very clear. So I really do think we need this retreat.
You've been wanting to come up and say something, so why don't you come up?
Why don't you say something and then let's vote?
Just for a final plea, I can see where for you guys, you have a set of 10 standards that you can vote on and cannot vote on, and you don't want to set a certain precedent. Like Mr. Dudnick said, in the past, aluminum clad was approved at some point in time. I legitimately don't think that this material of this window is visually different from an aluminum clad window as far as the frame is concerned. I'm willing to leave out the muttons if that is a terrible thing to look at, which I agree, like, it does not look the same. I'm on your side completely. I think where this is a different case from everybody else that would be approaching you is perhaps that you can say there is a significant health risk to keeping these windows to 2 children in the family that are at risk for lead poisoning if these windows are kept. And I just please ask you to reconsider, because if I can't replace these windows, I don't know how I can move my family into this home. There's a difference in adults living in this home and using the windows, and then there's a significantly different situation when there's children living in the home. My kids track things all the time. They sit on the windowsills. They're kids. And if you say no, I really don't know what I can do. I have no other alternative.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Julie, you mentioned that the side elevations are really difficult to see from public way. You can see them, you said. Okay. So they are in our purview of the public way. Okay. So all 4 are from public way.
You can see the back, but the side elevations,
Yeah, when you walk up the sidewalk.
But you can, from the front, you can only see a part of the south side of the house, not the entire south side of the house. In fact, there's 15 windows that are not visible from a public way out of 24.
A house that's on a lot, you see obliquely, and that's considered seeing the house from a public way, like you see it. It's not like the last 3 windows. Were you making the case the last 3 windows that you can't see, you do those vinyl, and the other ones, I mean, it just
I
doesn't
agree.
make a lot of sense. I mean, we have, okay, I'll say, like, if we were talking about basement windows or something, I mean, maybe that is not really an issue, but I think that you can see the facades.
Okay, thank you. Beth?
And I just wanted to mention, I think that these standards, they certainly do allow you to replace the windows, because there is a hazard. There is a hazardous or dangerous condition. I think that is clear in the standard that you can replace it. I think where I'm having the trouble and where it gets stuck is what you're replacing it with. And I went through the same exact thing as you did 4 years ago, and so I definitely understand what you're facing, and that kind of stress that goes straight to your gut, and so I get that. I think the standards that we have in front of us require a certain product or a certain material to be used, and the item that you're proposing now does not meet that standard, in my opinion. I would encourage you to consider different strategies, because I don't think that the strategy that you have right now is going to meet the standard.
Okay, well, I think we should vote. I think we still need a motion to approve. If somebody could make the motion, whether they agree with it or not. Ken, go ahead.
Okay. I move we issue a certificate of appropriateness for the work at 612 Judson Avenue, which would include replacement of 21 existing double-hung wood windows with vinyl windows with grills between the panes of glass. Standards for alteration 1 through 10 are applicable.
Second.
Second. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? And I'll abstain.
Is 9-0?
No, I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining?
Yeah.
Is there conflict of interest?
0, aye.
can't.
Abstention should only be for conflict of interest.
Mark, not anymore. No, I got into trouble for that, so don't start.
Okay, well, I'll vote no then. Is there anything else that we can say that would?
Well, so I think that the next step, if they want to proceed, is the appeal, and I'll be happy to assist you with the appeal. Goes to the council, and they have the tools to make a decision that you're seeking for. Okay.
Okay. Approval of the meeting minutes? Do you need more information on the vote at all?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. And one thing I'd like to request is the standards that have not been met so we can have in the report, please.
Thank you.
Anybody would like to highlight what standards have not been met?
There's definitely 6. Is the vent replacement is necessary, and the new material should match the material being replaced.
And number 5 is also relevant, removing the distinctive stylistic features of the wood windows and not treating them sensitively.
Any other? Okay.
Is it necessary to state that for number 2, that lead is a hazardous or dangerous condition? Is it necessary to state that? It does meet that one, but not the other.
Right. You can, if you say that 2 that's met, but does it mean that the others are met too, or just 2?
I just didn't know. I mean, we're talking about the ones that it doesn't meet, but I do think it does, that lead presents a hazard.
Okay.
That's, I do feel like that checks that box.
Yeah, normally you would not be allowed to remove it.
Right, because they're
With that
functioning,
exception,
the
no.
windows function, they've spent the money to repair them already, and so you might ask, well, why would you even replace them to begin with? She's already gone through all this work, what's the point? So, I think, but because, and so that should be avoided, so replace the removal or alteration of any historic material or distinctive architectural features shall be avoided whenever possible. So that, I would have said that, but except when retention represents a hazardous or dangerous condition.
Okay, definitely. That is met.
Yes.
Correct.
I think lead is a qualifier for dangerous or hazardous condition.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay.
I think the minutes were, I believe the minutes had some changes as a result of Ken's review.
Yeah, yes, there were 2 edits on page 5.
Yeah. And I think it was fine otherwise, so I don't know if anybody else. I would move to approve the minutes of the December 10th, 2019 meeting with the editorial changes made as a result of Ken's review.
Second, Aleka, all in favor? Aye.
No, you weren't.
Okay.
You can say they read well.
You know, but before we go to staff reports, Beth, I'm sorry, you were first at the last meeting, and it was like a crazy 4-hour meeting. So we'll welcome you. Do you want to just tell us anything about yourself or your interest in preservation?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to join the group. Thank you all for having me. Yeah, so I've been in Evanston for 6 years, and was in Chicago for about 15 or so before that. And my background, my training is in historic preservation, and I came back to Chicago. I went program, renovation and design program for, as a consultant. And so, kind of had my hands in, kind of house museum quality stuff, and then some more mundane kind of projects, not quite so exciting. So, very happy to be part of this group, and I'm dipping my toes back into the preservation world, and getting familiar with the Secretary of Standards, all that kind of stuff again. It's been a while. So, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
So Julian Oleka, I don't know if you wanted to report on preservation sustainability.
We'll just give a quick report. We have another meeting coming up at the end of the week. We've spent the last couple months reviewing and talking on the phone and to cities and states across the country, more than a dozen, from the East Coast to the West Coast to locally, to compare our review process and guidelines and with others on the topic of solar panels, and we're happy to find that we're kind of in line with a majority. We could add some more clarification and guidelines, and are going to work with the committee on that.
And I think I wanted to say that because we really don't have any guidelines, I mean, is the problem, that I think what we're going to do is recommend, because our next meeting is this week, that we need to really meet at our retreat, whenever that may be, with the whole commission to talk about what those guidelines may be, since we don't have any, and how they piggyback onto the sustainability group, which somehow we are completely disconnected from. So we'll see. But we're doing a lot of work. I don't know if anybody else is. Like, I know we are.
I mean, it's an encouraging process, because I think that when we come back and as a commission, we can decide, but it's a nice process that we're working with sustainability and energy, and hope to get clarification to the citizens of Evanston and have it on all the different sites, so that, it's very clear, kind of give more guidance, and it's very clear, not just on our site, which we can improve, but on sustainability and energy sites too.
Well, is Kumar part of the process, so that the end proposal be something that they could sign off on? And
that's what we're hoping.
I mean, we're talking Thursday.
That's why we're working towards that. We're presenting something. Kumar is presenting something. Nate, the first meeting was just really information. With Nate Kipnis, if you know him, presented something. So that's the goal, that we all come to consensus. But I think, guidelines are not going to be written in this committee, I don't think. I think the strategy would be that we come away with, if we can, with here's a direction that everyone can live with, and then we, this is what I'm thinking, and we haven't had our meeting, and then we come back to the commission and maybe at our retreat, and we try to, either Oleka and I come back with guidelines that we all review, and then we have to go back to this committee and then have them, review it and sort of rubber stamp it. Yeah. So,
We
or
definitely have to
endorse
decide
it.
with them also, but we're not going to make any guidelines without bringing
Yeah,
it
yeah.
to discussion.
You said that we're in line with a lot of other cities, but how are we in line if we don't have guidelines? I don't understand.
I think that what Oleka was, we have been using, or some of us have been using the National Park Service standards. Those really are the bedrock for, except maybe in California, where it's there, but it's usurped by, local commissions are usurped by the state. But, so that is really the foundation, but it isn't written anywhere, and it isn't clear anywhere, and so I think that, that's what we're talking about, that is common throughout the country. It seems that they're still basing on it. So there's an emphasis on not denying solar panels, which we don't want to do, but there's also an emphasis on kind of, in terms of the front facades and minimizing them on roofs, like as in the National Park Service, those recommendations, all of those things. Like how can you work with the homeowner to mitigate those issues? And so that's the comment. Okay. And not just, yeah, right. And it's not, and I just want to say this because I know this came up maybe the meeting before last, where it isn't really simply like you can take them off. I mean, that isn't the single, that's maybe an idea that you can just remove them so they're okay. But I think we have to look at it in sort of in a larger framework. Also, we have to look at what happens when you put something on like a slate roof. How are those connections made? Are you destroying the material that the panels are going on and all of that, which we don't have anything right now in our guidelines to even evaluate that, so.
Yeah, that is one thing cities are asking for more detail than we ask for, showing how things are attached, the mechanism they're attached, the various elevations and view lines and primary facade. So I think we talk about those things, as they are in our standards, Secretary of Interior standards and our standards, but I don't think we ask people as clearly as we do for windows, say, to provide certain things so we can make our decision and make it as clear to people as some other places too in their guidelines about, like, these are the primary facades we're talking about. These are, the occurrence.
And then the other thing is, like, a lot of cities are just developing guidelines because even though solar panels have been around, there haven't really been great guidelines all over. I mean, you find it in like California and Denver and Colorado, but further east we looked at Cambridge and they're just developing them. They haven't been approved yet. So
like the last 5+ years, like DC just in.
Okay.
Developing building codes for the installation of those, or?
I think it's like, well, okay, so if you go on site and you look at, we have like 4 guidelines for windows, for instance. I mean, there's a package of what you would submit. So you can see like the steel window, steel sash, and maybe those things we look at again, but there's already a sort of a packet of what you would look at for windows. We have nothing for solar panels. And I think they should be rather broad and not really prescriptive, so we're not having like 20 images of like put them on the back of the roof, but we just sort of make a statement, but we don't even have that. We have nothing. We have basically nothing.
We ran into kind of a buzzsaw in the fall where we thought a project was just the solar panels were highly visible from the front facade and really stood out. And we, by a narrow vote, like 3-2 or something, disapproved it. And the city council overturned us. And a primary reason was that we'd approved all the prior solar panel projects that had ever come before us. And since we had I think number one, we didn't have these kind of standards to point to. And secondly, we didn't have any agreement by other people in the city, such as sustainability, that said that it's legitimate for us to have some standards. And so that's from, I mean, the city wants this issue looked at, but I think from our point of view, it will help people before us, will help us make decisions, and then it will make our decisions enforceable, which we really weren't able to enforce that decision and we got voted down like 9-0.
And I think more importantly, and for me this is the case, I don't know anyone who went to the camp that we had, but sustainability and preservation should go hand in hand. They should not be separate. We should not be seen as obstructionists for these issues. And the only way that's going to happen is hopefully through this committee where, Kumar is on board and we're on board with him, and so that we can work together, and maybe there's some public outreach in terms of not just these solar panels, but how do you rehabilitate, historic home, make it more energy efficient? Like, these are really big issues, and they're not really, if they're addressed through the sustainability site, preservation is not piggybacking onto that, and that, I think, is a real big problem here in Evanston. It shouldn't be, but it has been, so trying to segue into that, because really when I think we looked at it, it's like 14%, is that what we said? 14% or something like that?
The number of, the percentage of structures, not including like smaller things, but Carlos and an individual in the city counted up the structures. We are responsible for review of less than 14% of the structures in Evanston.
So when you think about that, about the issue of the city moving towards like net zero, footprint, it's sort of like, well, what happens to all the other houses? And like, what if they can't afford solar panels? And do we have solar farms? I mean, there's just these bigger issues, I think, that really come into play because we are a very small piece of this. So hopefully this committee we'll see. Right?
Seems good.
Okay.
So the meeting is on Thursday, January 16 at 6:30 p.m. That's for the record.
All right. On the pitch proposal, so Aleka, I'll send you the Shoreline Alliance. I'm making a note to do it tomorrow morning, the website. And maybe I'll get to visit it this Saturday during their office hours if they're open. So we were going to schedule another meeting for a few weeks out with Dino. Was that the?
Yes. I'm sorry. So we sent you an email suggesting a couple of dates that you could not make it. So you said that you will be available in February, either 6 or 7, I believe. It was a Thursday and Friday. So that's just before the meeting.
Are those okay with you?
I didn't get that email.
Yeah.
Do you have a calendar to look now, or?
This is for the pitch working group. And if we meet, would be I presume it's going to be like in the morning at 8 p.m. 8 a.m. Excuse me.
For me, if it's okay.
Either the 6 or 7, Thursday or Friday in February. And the time is 8 a.m.
I could do the 6th, I have jury duty the 7th.
Okay, so that will be Thursday.
So if you want to see if Dino can do it, we can.
Yeah, I think he can. We just want to make sure that you could. So I will verify with Dino about the 6th of February.
Okay. Then,
8 a.m.
Yeah, here, yeah. Then should we set a date for the retreat? Would that be the?
We discussed that at the last meeting, and it would be good to have a date for the retreat so we can have enough time to have a room and develop the agenda. I understand that you want to have a self-taught retreat. It seems that windows would be one of the primary issues, and I think that also Scott mentioned we need to be a little bit more creative and try to do some educational and programmatic attempts to bring the commission in a better light in front of the community. So we need to figure out. I will be putting a survey to see what other topics you want to discuss. But if you would put the date today, we can work on that.
I think last year we met on a Friday, but I mean, how do people feel about like Friday morning, Friday afternoon, or Saturday? I don't know.
Yeah.
What's easy for people.
camp was in April, and it was a Friday from, I believe, 8:30 till about 3:30. It was a whole day, but this doesn't have to be that long, but it was a Friday. We did it for camp. I think it's a very aggressive schedule, and Kumar was talking about maybe sometime in March or April.
Can we do this in March on like the 20th or 27th or no?
Not the 20th. Is generally Friday, let's say Friday afternoon, a good time for people versus? Yeah, I mean, I was like, a Saturday is fine for me. I don't know.
Would Saturday be a better choice? Or?
What about the 21st?
I can't do that. I won't be in town. 28th? 28th, good?
Of March?
Yes.
At what time?
Looks fine now.
Would you like 9 o'clock or?
9 a.m.?
Yeah, 9 to noon. Would you rather even say earlier, like 8:30 to noon or 9 o'clock? Okay.
And speak up, because is it?
3 hours is a retreat?
Do you want to do it all day?
Well, we could, I don't know if we can have, yeah, lunch
I think
sometime.
you've
Go
gotta
through
make
like
it-
1:30
I
or
think
something.
allocate the day, but that's-
So it would
1:30 or something?
Yeah, it will depend on how much we need to discuss. So, but I will put 9 a.m. and
I haven't been on a retreat here with a group since I've been on, this is my last year, my 6th year. I went to.
There never was
That
one.
was different. Yeah, that was different. This is just us saying like, how can we be more effective, how, all of those things.
So, all right, so the topics I think we kind of at least have some of. So Windows is obviously a huge one. I guess to have it self-taught, we'll have to have, I mean, I guess we could even ask somebody to come in for 45 minutes. I don't know how we should do this. I mean, we definitely need technical
Scott?
knowledge.
Once there's more than 3 of us, everybody in the world can attend, right?
It's likely to be a public meeting, yeah.
It's a public meeting.
Does it have to be filmed?
I don't believe so, no,
Okay.
Does
necessarily.
it have to be what?
Filmed.
or record it, yeah.
We also don't have to provide them lunch.
Maybe we should, how about this, maybe we should think about, because I have some other topics, and how should we get all our topics together? And then we could figure out how we want to deal with them. Because,
If you want to send them to me, and let's do it all in the next week, and then I'll send out maybe some kind of outline, and then maybe some alternatives for people to react to or something.
I mean, the thing about Windows is, I don't know how many, since we've seen so many, I don't know what people need to see. We can bring in Windows that are clad SDLs, or it doesn't matter if they're Marvin or Pella, or, we can get actual Windows that we can just bring in and discuss them, and we can have a single do we want to do that?
Yes.
I don't know if I could call up some people, and then, but I don't have a vinyl.
And then I think we should, by that time, a couple weeks before, we should have, I don't know, an agenda, but we should also have on the solar things, if we put together some broad
'Cause we wanna have the
guidelines
solar
and then
discussion.
give them to everybody,
Right,
and
right.
people can,
Okay.
I guess we should do some homework
work,
before we
yeah.
come to the meeting, so that we can have constructive discussions on.
Yeah, I think my idea was to get, if everybody could get me the agendas, let's say by Martin Luther King Day, and then I'll get something back out, or get it to Carlos to get back out with, proposals and alternatives or whatever, and ask for, if there's any vote on any things in doubt. But then I think the only way this is going to be worthwhile is if somebody is in, one or two people are in charge of each topic and actually, do whatever is necessary to bring, like, obviously the windows is the obvious case of bringing things in.
Okay, that's, I also think we should think about some bigger issues of like. I also think we should think about bigger issues like, what do we need if we, and do we need from the city? How would the city itself help us in our, in this commission and in our role? And then what do we think the public might need from us? I mean, we've never, I did a workshop the first year I was a commissioner. But we really haven't done that either. So those kinds of issues I think are important because we really are not active in that way, so.
Okay, I mean, that's a good idea, and it goes with your other, I mean, if you could just send them all to me, then I'll try to frame them. Maybe some of them are related, and I can aggregate them, and then I'll do an outline and get it back to everybody to, to react to and vote on, and. Okay. And then we'll have it here, right?
I mean, we can try to look for other venues, but this will be the most economical. We can have the fourth floor, the parasol room. There's also the smaller meeting rooms on the second floor. So we can explore what would be most appropriate for a retreat within the city's civic center. So
Okay.
I need to find out what will be available and all that.
Okay, so maybe when you do that, I don't know if it's possible, just do an invite to everybody and get on their calendar.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. And I'll, get your reaction to the agenda before I send it out too.
Of course.
Thanks. I think we could, anything else before we adjourn? Only 10 o'clock this time. Motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, Ken. And all in favor, I'm sorry, second?
Second?
Second.
Second.
Susie, second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.